The morning sun cast long shadows across the busy downtown street, as 8-year-old twins Alex and Amy sat huddled together on the cold concrete steps, their small bodies pressed against each other for warmth, sharing the only thin blanket they owned. 3 months had passed since their world turned upside down, and every day felt like a battle for survival. The twins looked nothing like the other children who walked past them on their way to school. While those kids carried colorful backpacks and wore clean clothes, Alex and Amy's outfits were wrinkled and dirty from sleeping on park benches and in doorways. Their shoes had holes that let in the cold, and their hair hadn't been properly washed in weeks. But despite their rough appearance, their eyes still held a spark of hope that somehow things would get better. Amy clutched a small piece of stale bread they had found behind a bakery the night before. She carefully broke it in half, giving the larger piece to her brother Alex, even though her own stomach was growling loudly. This had become their routine, always looking out for each other, always making sure the other was okay before taking care of themselves. "Do you think Grandma Rose can see us right now?" Amy whispered to her brother, her voice barely audible above the street noise. Alex nodded slowly, touching the silver bracelet on his wrist. "She's watching over us," she promised. She always would, remember? Both children wore identical silver bracelets that seemed too expensive for their current situation. The bracelets had intricate designs carved into them, with small gems that caught the light when they moved their hands. These weren't ordinary jewelry pieces, they looked like they belonged to a wealthy family. Grandma Rose had given them these bracelets on her deathbed, making them promise to never take them off, no matter what happened. "These will keep you safe," she had whispered with her last breath. "And someday, they'll help you find where you truly belong." The twins didn't understand what she meant back then, and they still didn't understand now. All they knew was that these bracelets were their most precious possessions, and they would rather go hungry than sell them for food. As the morning grew busier, more people in expensive suits and shiny shoes walked past them. Some threw spare change into the small cup Alex held, while others pretended not to see them at all. The twins had learned not to take it personally. Most adults seemed too busy with their own lives to worry about two homeless children. Around noon, a black luxury car pulled up to the curb in front of the tall glass building across the street. The building was so tall that the twins had to crane their necks all the way back to see the top. Golden letters on the front spelled out Wellington Industries, though the twins couldn't read them very well. A man stepped out of the car, and even from across the street, it was obvious he was different from everyone else. He wore a perfectly tailored dark suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. His confident walk and the way other people moved out of his way showed that he was someone very important. This was David Wellington, though the twins had no idea who he was. Amy grabbed her brother's arm. "Alex, look at that man. Do you think he might help us?" Alex studied the tall man carefully. Most rich people they had approached either ignored them completely or told them to go away. But something about this man seemed different. Maybe it was the way he paused to help an elderly woman who dropped her purse, or how he smiled at a little girl who waved at him from a stroller. "I don't know," Alex said quietly, "but we're running out of options. We haven't eaten a real meal in 2 days." The twins had tried going to the local shelter, but it was always full. They had tried asking shopkeepers for work, but everyone said they were too young. They had even tried going to the police, but without any family to claim them, they were told they would be separated and put into different foster homes. The thought of being apart from each other was scarier than living on the streets. As David Wellington walked toward the building entrance, Amy made a decision that would change their lives forever. She stood up on shaky legs, took her brother's hand, and started walking across the street. Alex wanted to protest, but he knew they were desperate. They needed help, and this might be their only chance. The man was almost at the glass doors when Amy called out in her small, nervous voice, "Excuse me, sir. Please wait." David turned around, expecting to see a business colleague or maybe someone delivering papers. Instead, he saw 2 small children running toward him, their worn clothes and thin faces telling a story he recognized from charity reports he read, but rarely witnessed firsthand. When the twins reached him, they were both breathing heavily from running across the busy street. Up close, David could see just how young they were and how much they had been through. But what caught his attention most were the silver bracelets on their wrists. Something about those bracelets made him freeze in place. "Please, mister," Amy said, her voice trembling with nervousness and hope. "We don't want to bother you, but we really need help. We haven't had a proper meal in days, and we don't have anywhere safe to sleep." Alex stepped closer to his sister, ready to protect her if the man got angry or told them to go away. "We can work for food," he added quickly. "We're not asking for charity. We can clean or carry things or run errands." David stared at the children, but his eyes kept returning to those bracelets. The design was so familiar, like something from a distant memory that he couldn't quite grasp. The silver work was definitely expensive, real craftsmanship that belonged in a jewelry store, not on the wrists of homeless children. "Where did you get those bracelets?" he asked gently, crouching down to their eye level. The twins exchanged a look. They had learned to be careful about their belongings, especially the bracelets. Some adults had tried to take them away, claiming they were too valuable for children to own. "Our Grandma Rose gave them to us," Amy said carefully, "before she went to heaven. She said they were very special and that we should never take them off. She said they would keep us safe," Alex added, unconsciously touching his bracelet. David felt a strange chill run down his spine. There was something about these children, something beyond just their desperate situation, that pulled at his heart. He had donated millions to children's charities over the years, but he had never felt personally connected to any specific case. This was different. "What are your names?" he asked softly. "I'm Amy, and this is my twin brother Alex," Amy replied. "We're 8 years old, and we've been taking care of each other since Grandma Rose died." "What happened to your parents?" David asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. "They died in a car accident when we were really little," Alex explained. "We don't remember them much. Grandma Rose raised us, but then she got sick and couldn't get better." David's heart ached for these children. He thought about his own comfortable life, his successful business, and his empty mansion where he lived alone. Here were two kids who had lost everything, but still looked out for each other with such love and determination. "Are you hungry right now?" he asked. Both children nodded eagerly, though they tried not to seem too desperate. David made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of just giving them money or directing them to his company's charity foundation, he said, "There's a restaurant right here in this building. Would you like to have lunch with me?" The twins couldn't believe what they were hearing. A real meal, in a real restaurant, with someone who seemed genuinely kind. It felt too good to be true, Rilini whispered, her eyes wide with hope and disbelief. "Really?" David confirmed with a warm smile. "But first, let me make some phone calls. I want to make sure you have a safe place to stay tonight." As he led them toward the building entrance, David couldn't stop thinking about those bracelets and the strange feeling that this meeting was more than just a coincidence. He had no idea that within hours, his entire understanding of his past would be turned upside down. The next morning, David woke up with an unusual feeling in his chest. For the first time in years, he was excited about something that had nothing to do with business deals or profit margins. He kept thinking about Alex and Amy, the two brave children who had approached him yesterday. After their lunch together, he had arranged for them to stay at Sunshine Children's Home, one of the best shelters in the city. But somehow, that didn't feel like enough. During breakfast, David found himself staring at his phone, eager to call the shelter and check on the twins. This was completely unlike him. Usually, he handled charity work through his assistants and foundation managers. He never got personally involved. But something about those two kids had touched his heart in a way he couldn't explain. At exactly 9 in the morning, David called Mrs. Peterson, the director of Sunshine Children's Home. "How are Alex and Amy doing?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, Mr. Wellington, they're wonderful children," Mrs. Peterson replied warmly. "They're so polite and well-behaved. Amy helped serve breakfast to the younger kids this morning, and Alex has been reading stories to them. It's clear that someone raised them with a lot of love." David smiled at this news. "I'd like to visit them today if that's okay." And I want to make sure they have everything they need: clothes, school supplies, whatever they're missing. That's very generous of you, sir. The children will be so happy to see you again." After hanging up, David did something he had never done before in his 35 years of life. He canceled his morning meetings and went shopping for children's clothes and toys. Walking through the toy store felt strange and wonderful at the same time. He found himself picking out puzzles for Alex, who seemed to love solving problems, and art supplies for Amy, who had mentioned wanting to draw pictures of her late grandmother. When David arrived at the shelter that afternoon, both twins ran to greet him like he was their favorite uncle. Their faces were clean, their hair was brushed, and they were wearing the simple but clean clothes the shelter provided. Yet they still wore those mysterious silver bracelets that had caught his attention the day before. "Mr. David," Amy called out, throwing her small arms around his waist. "We were hoping you would come back." "I told you I would," David said, feeling surprisingly emotional. "I brought you some things." The twins' eyes grew wide as David presented them with bags full of new clothes, books, and toys. But what touched him most was how they immediately wanted to share everything with the other children at the shelter. This level of kindness and generosity from kids who had so little was something David had rarely seen, even among wealthy adults. As they sat together in the shelter's common room, David began asking gentle questions about their past. He was genuinely curious about their story, but he also couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important he was missing. "Tell me more about your Grandma Rose," David said as Amy colored in a new coloring book. "What was she like?" "She was the kindest person in the whole world," Amy said, without looking up from her drawing. "She always made sure we had enough food, even when she didn't eat much herself. And she told the best bedtime stories." Alex nodded enthusiastically. "She used to clean houses for rich people to make money for us. She worked really hard, but she was always happy when she came home. She said taking care of us was the best job she ever had." "Do you remember the names of the families she worked for?" David asked, though he wasn't sure why this information seemed important to him. The twins thought for a moment. "There were a lot of different families over the years," Alex said, "but she talked about one family more than the others. She said she worked for them a long time ago, before we were born. She always got sad when she talked about that time," Amy added quietly, like she was remembering something that made her happy and sad at the same time. David felt that strange chill again, the same feeling he had experienced when he first saw their bracelets. "Did she ever mention the family's name?" Both children shook their heads. "She just called them the people from the big house," Alex explained. "But she said working there changed her whole life." That evening, after David left the shelter, he couldn't concentrate on anything else. The twin story kept playing in his mind like a puzzle with missing pieces. Something about their grandmother working for a wealthy family, combined with those expensive bracelets, felt significant in a way he couldn't understand. Unable to sleep, David went to his home office and opened his laptop. He began searching for information about Rose Martinez, the name the twins had given him for their grandmother. It took several hours, but eventually, he found some old employment records. Rose Martinez had indeed worked as a housekeeper for various wealthy families in the city over the past 30 years. But when David tried to find records from 25 years ago, around the time the twins said she worked for the people from the big house, he hit a wall. The records were either missing or incomplete. This struck him as odd, since Rose seemed to have detailed employment history both before and after that period. The next day, David visited the twins again, this time bringing lunch from their favorite restaurant. As they ate together, he found himself studying their faces more carefully. There was something about the way Alex tilted his head when he was thinking, and the way Amy's eyes crinkled when she smiled, that seemed familiar. He tried to dismiss these thoughts as his imagination, but the feeling persisted. "Mr. David," Amy said suddenly, "why are you being so nice to us? Most adults are too busy to spend time with kids they don't even know." The question caught David off guard. He realized he had been asking himself the same thing. "I guess you to remind me of someone," he said honestly, though he wasn't sure who. "Who do we remind you of?" Alex asked curiously. I'm not sure yet, David admitted, but I promise you, I'll figure it out. That afternoon, David made a decision that would change everything. He drove to his mother's house, an elegant mansion on the other side of the city where he had grown up. His mother, Catherine Wellington, was 70 years old and sharp as ever. She had been running the family's charitable foundation since David's father passed away 10 years earlier. Catherine was in her garden when David arrived, tending to her prized roses. She looked up in surprise when she saw her son approaching. David rarely visited without calling first, and never in the middle of a workday. This is an unexpected pleasure, Catherine said, removing her gardening gloves. What brings you here, dear? I wanted to tell you about something that happened this week, David began. I met two children who needed help, twins, about 8 years old. Catherine nodded politely. That's wonderful that you helped them, though I'm surprised you got personally involved instead of directing them to the foundation. That's just it, Mom. I can't explain why, but I felt a connection to these kids that I've never felt before. David paused, then added, they're wearing bracelets that look expensive. Family heirlooms, maybe. And their grandmother used to work as a housekeeper for wealthy families. As David described the bracelets in detail, the intricate silver work, the small gems, the unique design, he noticed his mother's face growing pale. Her hands began to tremble slightly, and she sat down heavily on a nearby garden bench. Mom, are you all right? David asked, concerned by her sudden change in demeanor. These bracelets, Catherine said in a shaky voice. Can you describe them again? Every detail? David repeated his description, watching as his mother's expression grew more distressed with each word. When he finished, Catherine was silent for a long moment, staring at her hands. What is it, Mom? Do you recognize them? Catherine looked up at her son with tears in her eyes. I think we need to go inside and talk. There's something I should have told you a long time ago. As they walked toward the house, David felt his heart pounding. Whatever his mother was about to tell him, he sensed it would explain the mysterious connection he felt to Alex and Amy. But he had no idea just how much his entire world was about to change. The comfortable life he had known, the understanding he had of his own past, and the future he had planned were all about to be turned upside down by the truth his mother had been hiding for 25 years. David followed his mother Catherine into the living room, his heart racing with anxiety. He had never seen her look so shaken before. Catherine was always the strong one in the family, the person who held everything together after his father died. But right now, she looked fragile and scared, like someone who had been carrying a heavy secret for far too long. Catherine walked to the old wooden cabinet in the corner of the room and pulled out a key from her jewelry box. David watched in confusion as she unlocked the bottom drawer, something he had never seen her do before. Her hands were trembling as she pulled out a thick folder filled with old photographs and documents. Sit down, David, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about your past. David sat on the sofa, feeling like a child again. Mom, you're scaring me. What does this have to do with Alex and Amy? Catherine took a deep breath and opened the folder. The first thing she pulled out was an old photograph that made David's heart skip a beat. It showed a young woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, holding two identical silver bracelets. The woman looked to be in her 20s, with dark hair and features that seemed strangely familiar. This is Rose Martinez, Catherine said softly. But 26 years ago, she was just Rose. She worked here, in this house, as our housekeeper. David stared at the photograph, trying to process what his mother was telling him. This is the twins' grandmother? She worked for us? She was more than just our housekeeper, David. She was someone very special to you. The way his mother said those words made David's stomach drop. What do you mean? Catherine pulled out another photograph, this one showing David as a young man of about 25, laughing with the same woman from the first picture. They were in the garden behind the house, and it was clear from their body language that they cared deeply for each other. You loved her, Catherine said simply. And she loved you. David felt like the room was spinning. I don't remember her. How is that possible? You were going through a difficult time back then, Catherine explained. "Your father was pressuring you to take over the business. You had just graduated from college, and you were struggling with what you wanted to do with your life. Rose was working here during the summer, and she was like a ray of sunshine in your dark period." As Catherine spoke, fragments of memories began floating back to David's mind. He remembered laughing with someone in the garden, long conversations about dreams and fears, and feeling understood in a way he had never experienced before. "She was different from the other girls you had dated," Catherine continued. "She was real, honest, and she saw you for who you truly were, not just for your family's money. You spent the entire summer together, and I had never seen you so happy." "What happened to her?" David asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "She left suddenly, without saying goodbye." "You searched for her everywhere, David. You hired private investigators, you called every number you could find, but she had disappeared completely. You were heartbroken for months." David felt the anger rising in his chest. "Why didn't you help me find her? You had resources, connections." "Because I knew why she left," Catherine whispered, unable to meet her son's eyes. The silence in the room was deafening. David waited for his mother to continue, but she seemed to be struggling with something very difficult. "Mom, what did you do?" Catherine reached into the folder again and pulled out a hospital document. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. "A few weeks after Rose left, I received a call from a private hospital. Rose had given birth to twins." David felt like he couldn't breathe. "Twins? A boy and a girl. The hospital staff said she had listed you as the father on the birth certificates, but she didn't want you contacted. She said she would handle everything herself." "Are you telling me that Alex and Amy are your children?" Catherine finished the sentence. "Those bracelets they're wearing belong to your great-grandmother. Rose must have taken them when she left, probably as proof of their connection to our family." David stood up abruptly, pacing the room as he tried to process this information. "Why didn't you tell me I had children, and you kept it from me for 25 years? Catherine started crying, something David had rarely seen in his adult life. "I was scared, David. You were so young, and Rose was just a housekeeper's daughter. I thought it would ruin your future, your chances of finding someone from our social circle, your ability to run the family business. So you let me think she had abandoned me? You let me believe that the woman I loved had just disappeared without a reason? I thought I was protecting you," Catherine sobbed. "I gave Rose money to disappear and take care of the children. I thought it was the best solution for everyone." David felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak that was almost overwhelming. "What happened to the children? The hospital records?" Catherine pulled out more documents from the folder. "According to these papers, the twins died shortly after birth. Rose told the hospital they had complications and didn't survive. But now I realize she must have faked their deaths to protect them from us. She raised them as her grandchildren." David said, the pieces finally coming together. "She told them their parents died in a car accident to protect them from the truth. She must have loved them so much," Catherine whispered. "And she must have loved you enough to sacrifice everything to keep them safe." David sat back down, his head in his hands. "All these years, I had children living in the same city, and I never knew. Rose raised them alone, worked multiple jobs to support them, and then died, leaving them with nothing. But she left them the bracelets," Catherine pointed out. "She must have hoped that someday they would find their way back to you. Or maybe she wanted them to have something valuable they could sell if they ever got desperate enough," David said bitterly. For the next hour, Catherine showed David more photographs and documents she had kept hidden for over 2 decades. There were pictures of him and Rose together, love letters Rose had written but never sent, and even a few hospital records showing the twins' birth. As David looked through everything, he began to remember more details about that summer. He remembered Rose's laugh, the way she hummed while she worked, and how she always seemed to see the good in everyone. He remembered telling her about his dreams and fears, and how she encouraged him to follow his heart instead of just doing what was expected of him. "She was the love of my life," David said quietly, "and I lost her because of fear and social expectations. I'm so sorry, David, Catherine said. I've regretted my decision every day for 25 years. When your father died and I saw how alone you were, I realized what a terrible mistake I had made. David looked at his mother with a mixture of anger and pity. Alex and Amy have been living on the streets, Mom. They were hungry and homeless while we lived in luxury, never knowing they were family. What are you going to do? Catherine asked. David stood up and headed toward the door. I'm going to tell them the truth. They deserve to know who they really are. David, wait, Catherine called after him. Are you sure that's the right thing to do? They've been through so much already. Learning that their entire life story was a lie might be too much for them to handle. David paused at the doorway. They're my children, Mom. They're smart, brave, and strong just like their mother was. They can handle the truth better than they can handle being lied to for the rest of their lives. As David drove back toward the children's shelter, his mind was racing with 1,000 different thoughts. He was angry at his mother for keeping the secret, heartbroken about losing Rose, and excited about the possibility of having a real family with Alex and Amy. But most of all, he was determined to make up for all the lost time. He thought about Rose, who had sacrificed everything to protect their children from a complicated situation that could have destroyed their lives. She had given up the man she loved and raised the twins alone, working hard every day to give them a good life. She had died keeping their secret, but she had left them the bracelets as a clue to their true identity. Now, it was David's turn to do the right thing, even if it meant admitting that everything Alex and Amy thought they knew about their lives was about to change forever. David drove through the city streets with his mind spinning like a tornado. Everything he thought he knew about his life had been turned upside down in just one afternoon. The twins he had been helping out of kindness might actually be his own children. The thought was both terrifying and wonderful at the same time. When he arrived at Sunshine Children's Home, David found Alex and Amy in the playroom, helping younger kids with their homework. Watching them be so caring and patient with the little ones made his heart ache. If they really were his children, Rose had done an amazing job raising them to be kind and thoughtful people. Mr. David, Amy called out when she saw him. You're here earlier than usual today. I wanted to see how you were doing, David said, trying to keep his voice normal even though his emotions were all over the place. Alex looked up from the math problem he was helping a 6-year-old solve. We're good. Mrs. Peterson said we might be able to start going to the local school next week. David felt a pang in his chest. These children were planning their future at a shelter, not knowing they might have a father who could give them everything they needed. But first, he had to be absolutely sure. As much as his heart wanted to believe his mother's story, he needed scientific proof before he could turn their worlds upside down. That's wonderful news about school, David said, sitting down with them. You both seem to really love learning. Grandma Rose always said education was the most important thing, Amy explained, carefully coloring inside the lines of her drawing. She said no one could ever take knowledge away from you, even if they took everything else. She sounds like a very wise woman, David said softly. I wish I could have met her. She would have liked you, Alex said with certainty. She always told us to look for people who were kind to others, especially to people who couldn't help them back. That's how you know someone has a good heart. David spent the next hour playing games with the twins, but his mind was constantly racing. He studied their faces, looking for similarities to his own features. Alex had the same dark hair and thoughtful eyes that David saw in old pictures of himself as a child. Amy had a stubborn chin that reminded him of his own mother, and she tilted her head the same way David did when he was concentrating. But physical similarities could just be coincidence. David knew he needed to be scientific about this, not emotional. The next morning, he called his family doctor, Dr. Williams, who had been taking care of the Wellington family for over 20 years. I need to ask you about DNA testing, David said during their private phone call. How accurate are the results? And how quickly can they be done? DNA paternity tests are extremely accurate, Dr. Williams explained. We're talking about 99.9% accuracy when the person is the biological parent. The process takes about 3 to 5 days for results. Is everything all right, David? I can't explain everything right now, but I need to know if 2 children might be biologically related to me. Can this be done without them knowing what the test is for? Dr. Williams was quiet for a moment. We would need samples from you and the children. For kids, we usually use a simple cheek swab. We could tell them. It's a routine health check if you prefer not to explain the real reason yet. That afternoon, David arranged for Dr. Williams to visit the shelter under the pretense of providing free health screenings for all the children. Alex and Amy were excited about seeing a doctor, since they hadn't had proper medical care in months. This is just to make sure you're both healthy, David explained as Dr. Williams prepared the cotton swabs. All the kids here are getting checked. The twins cooperated perfectly, not suspecting anything unusual about the quick cheek swabs. Dr. Williams also took David's sample in private and promised to rush the results. The next 3 days were the longest of David's life. He visited Alex and Amy every day, spending hours with them, getting to know their personalities better. The more time he spent with them, the more convinced he became that they were his children. Alex had David's logical mind and love for solving problems. He could figure out complex puzzles and math problems that impressed even the shelter workers. Amy had David's artistic side that he had forgotten about. She could draw beautiful pictures and had a creative way of looking at the world, but it was their emotional intelligence that really convinced David they were Rose's children. They were both incredibly empathetic, always noticing when someone was sad or worried and trying to help. This wasn't something that could be taught easily, it came from being raised by someone who truly understood kindness. On the 3rd day, David got the call he had been anxiously waiting for. David, this is Dr. Williams. Are you somewhere private where we can talk? David was in his office, but he closed the door and locked it anyway. Yes, I'm alone. What did you find out? The results are conclusive, Dr. Williams said. You are definitely the biological father of both children. There's absolutely no doubt about it. David sat down heavily in his chair, even though part of him had been expecting this news. Hearing it confirmed made it real in a way that nothing else could. David, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. Thank you for handling this so quickly and privately. After hanging up, David stared out his office window for a long time. He was a father. Alex and Amy weren't just 2 homeless children he was helping, they were his son and daughter. The family he had always wanted, but never thought he would have, was sitting in a children's shelter across town, not knowing their whole world was about to change. But knowing the truth and deciding what to do about it were 2 completely different things. David spent the rest of the day thinking about all the possible outcomes. Should he tell the twins immediately? Should he wait until he had everything arranged for them? Should he tell them gradually or all at once? That evening, David called his mother to share the news. The DNA test confirmed it, he said simply. Alex and Amy are my children. Catherine was quiet for a long moment. How do you feel about that? Honestly, I'm terrified and excited at the same time. I love them already, but I have no idea how to be a father. And I'm worried about how they'll react when they learn the truth. Maybe you should wait, Catherine suggested carefully. Let them get settled in their new life first. Once they're in school and feeling more secure, then you could gradually introduce the idea. Mom, they think their parents died in a car accident. They think their grandmother was actually their grandmother, finding out that everything they believed about their family was a lie. How do I even begin that conversation? Very carefully, Catherine said, and with a lot of love. David knew his mother was trying to be helpful, but he also remembered that she was the one who had created this whole situation in the first place. Her advice about protecting people from difficult truths wasn't exactly reliable. The next morning, David made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of visiting the twins at the shelter, he spent the day preparing his house for children. He converted one of his guest bedrooms into a room for Amy, with pink walls and stuffed animals. He turned another room into a space for Alex, with a desk for homework and shelves for books and puzzles. Then he went shopping for everything 2 8-year-old children might need: clothes, toys, school supplies, and even bicycles. As he filled his cart with items he had never bought before, David realized he was planning for a future he wasn't even sure would happen. What if the twins didn't want to live with him? What if learning the truth about their past made them angry and resentful? What if they preferred their life at the shelter to living in a mansion with the father they had never known existed? But David also thought about what Rose would want for her children. She had worked so hard to give them a good life. Even when she had very little money, she had kept them safe and raised them to be wonderful kids. Surely she would want them to have every opportunity possible, even if it meant they had to learn some difficult truths. By evening, David had made his final decision. Tomorrow, he would sit down with Alex and Amy and tell them everything. He would explain about Rose working for his family, about their love story, about why she had to leave, and about how much he already loved them. It would be the most important conversation of his life, and he just hoped he would find the right words to help them understand that everything he was telling them came from a place of love, not selfishness. As he looked at the children's rooms he had prepared, David whispered a prayer to Rose, wherever she was. I promise I'll take good care of them. I promise I'll love them the way you did. And I promise I'll never let them feel alone or unwanted again. David barely slept the night before what would be the most important conversation of his life. He kept rehearsing different ways to tell Alex and Amy the truth, but every approach seemed either too harsh or too confusing. How do you tell to 8-year-old children that everything they believed about their family was actually a loving lie meant to protect them? The next morning, David arrived at Sunshine Children's Home earlier than usual. His hands were shaking slightly as he walked through the familiar hallways. Mrs. Peterson noticed his nervous energy immediately. Mr. Wellington, is everything all right? You seem different today. I need to have a very important conversation with Alex and Amy, David said quietly. Is there somewhere private we could talk? Just the three of us? Mrs. Peterson led him to a small family meeting room that was used for difficult conversations. It had comfortable chairs, soft lighting, and tissues on the table, everything needed for emotional moments. When Alex and Amy entered the room, they immediately sensed something was different. David wasn't his usual cheerful self, and the formal setting made them both feel nervous. Are we in trouble? Amy asked, unconsciously touching her silver bracelet. No, sweetheart, you're not in trouble at all, David said gently. But I have something very important to tell you both. Something that's going to change your lives in a big way. The twins sat close together on the small sofa, holding hands the way they always did when they were scared or uncertain. David took a deep breath and began with the easiest part. Do you remember when I asked you about your Grandma Rose and the families she worked for? Both children nodded. Well, I found out something amazing. Your Grandma Rose used to work for my family. She worked in our house for several months, about 26 years ago. Alex's eyes widened. Really? Grandma Rose worked for your family? She did. And while she was working there, something wonderful happened. David pulled out one of the old photographs his mother had shown him. She met my son, who was about 25 years old at the time. Amy looked at the photograph curiously. Who was your son? David's voice was soft and emotional. Amy, Alex, I was that son. Your Grandma Rose and I knew each other a long time ago. We cared about each other very much. The twins looked confused. This was clearly not what they had been expecting to hear. I don't understand, Alex said slowly. If you knew Grandma Rose, why didn't you tell us before? Because I didn't remember her at first, David explained. It was a very long time ago, and a lot of sad things happened that made me forget those happy memories. But when I saw your bracelets, something started coming back to me. David showed them more photographs, pictures of him and Rose laughing together, working in the garden, and clearly enjoying each other's company. She looked so young and happy, Amy said, studying the pictures carefully. She was happy, David confirmed, and so was I. We spent the whole summer together, talking about our dreams and hopes for the future. I had never met anyone like her before. What happened? Alex asked. Why didn't you stay together? This was the hardest part. David had to explain adult problems to children in a way they could understand without making anyone seem like a villain. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions based on fear instead of love. David began carefully. My mother was worried that Rose and I were too different. She came from a poor family, and we were wealthy. She thought it would cause problems for everyone. That's not fair, Amy said firmly. Being poor doesn't make someone a bad person. You're absolutely right, David agreed. But my mother was scared, and scared people sometimes make mistakes. She convinced Rose to leave without telling me why. David paused, knowing the next part would be the most shocking. There's something else you need to know. When Rose left, she was going to have a baby. Actually, she was going to have 2 babies. The twins looked at each other, then back at David, clearly not understanding what this had to do with them. Those babies were born 8 years ago, David continued gently. A boy and a girl. Twins. Amy gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Alex just stared at David with wide eyes. Are you saying? Alex began, but couldn't finish the sentence. I'm saying that you are those babies, David said, his voice full of love and emotion. Alex and Amy, you're not just 2 children I decided to help. You're my son and daughter. The room fell completely silent. The twins looked at David, then at each other, then back at David. Their faces showed a mixture of shock, confusion, and disbelief. But our parents died in a car accident, Amy whispered. No, sweetheart. Your mother Rose, she's alive in our hearts, but she died recently as the grandmother you knew and loved. She raised you as her grandchildren to protect you, to keep you safe from a complicated situation. Alex stood up suddenly, pacing the small room. This doesn't make sense. If you're our father, why didn't you know about us? Why didn't you take care of us? David felt his heart breaking at the hurt in his son's voice. Because I didn't know you existed. Rose never told me she was pregnant. She wanted to protect all of us from a difficult situation. She sacrificed her own happiness to make sure you were safe and loved. So everything we thought we knew about our lives was a lie? Amy asked, tears starting to form in her eyes. No, a lie, David said quickly. Everything Rose told you about love, kindness, and taking care of each other, that was all true. The love she had for you was real. The lessons she taught you were real. She just changed some of the details to protect you. David showed them the silver bracelets in the old photographs. She left you these bracelets as a clue. Somewhere in her heart, she hoped that someday you would find your way back to me. Amy looked down at her bracelet, then up at David. So, these really do belong to your family? They belong to my great-grandmother. Rose must have taken them when she left, knowing that someday they might help you understand who you really are. For several minutes, no one spoke. David watched as the twins processed this life-changing information. He could see them thinking, trying to fit this new reality into everything they thought they knew about themselves. Finally, Alex asked the question David had been dreading. What happens now? Do we have to live with you? You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, David said honestly. I know this is a lot to understand all at once, but I want you to know that I love you both already, and I want to take care of you the way your mother Rose would have wanted. Do you have room for us in your house? Amy asked quietly. David smiled through his own tears. I have a whole house waiting for you. I prepared bedrooms for both of you, with everything I thought you might like. But more importantly, I have room in my heart for you, and that's something that will never run out. Over the next hour, David answered dozens of questions from the twins. They wanted to know about Rose's life before they were born, about David's memories of their mother, and about what their future would look like. Gradually, the shock began to wear off, and the twins started to see the positive side of this revelation. They weren't alone in the world anymore. They had a father who wanted to love and care for them. They had a grandmother who, despite her past mistakes, was eager to make amends. Can we still visit the other kids here sometimes? Alex asked. They're like our family too now, of course, David said. And we can help other children who are in situations like you were. Would you like that? Both twins nodded enthusiastically. As the day ended, David drove Alex and Amy to their new home. They sat quietly in the car, still processing everything they had learned. But when they saw the house and the rooms David had prepared for them, their faces lit up with wonder and hope. That night, as David tucked them into their new beds, Amy asked one more question. Do you think Grandma Rose, our mom, you think she's happy that we found you? David kissed her forehead gently. I think she's been watching over you this whole time, making sure you would find your way home. And yes, I think she's very happy." 3 months later, the adoption papers were finalized. Alex and Amy Wellington had officially become part of the family they had unknowingly belonged to all along. The silver bracelets remained on their wrists, no longer mysterious clues but cherished reminders of the love that had brought them home.